Hi, this is David from Mash IT. Today we want to have a quick comparison between the new XPS 9310 Tiger Lake laptop and against it, the best, in my opinion, Ryzen Ultrabook, the Thinkpad T14, and that has the Ryzen 5 Pro 4650U. The reason I wanted to compare both these laptops today is because the Ryzen series of laptops have become so incredibly popular because of the power in this CPU. But unfortunately, there are very few people putting them in premium notebooks. So I want to sort of show you the difference between what you're going to get for your money when you look at an expensive premium Tiger Lake laptop against a much cheaper ThinkPad performance Ryzen 5 Pro laptop. So just to start off, what we're going to do is we're going to quickly run through the specs of both these laptops so that you can see, what we're comparing against. If you've watched the recent review, this is the XPS 13 9310 Tiger Lake laptop. It's new for this year. It has the i7 Tiger Lake CPU in it with the Intel Xe graphics. It also has a 13-inch 1920 by 1200 screen, and that's the matte 500 nit panel. 16 gigabytes of high-speed DDR4 and a 512 gigabyte NVMe removable SSD. In comparison, we have the Thinkpad T14 with the Ryzen 5 Pro 4650U. That is a 15 watt, 6 core 12 thread CPU. It also has a 14-inch 400 nit low power 1080p panel. This came with 32 gigabyte of 3200 MHz DDR4 memory and a 1 terabyte SSD, M.2 SSD that also is upgradable. Now, to give you a comparison of the prices that I paid for both of these machines, this laptop, with a slightly lesser spec in my opinion, is actually £1,500 in the UK as we run this video. The T14 I bought with the Ryzen 5 Pro, 32 gig and 1 terabyte, cost me £1,000. So that's £500 extra for this premium Ultrabook. So for £500 extra, we're going to look at today, is this worth it? Is this worth an extra £500 over the sort of bulkier T14 from ThinkPad? So now that we've quickly looked at an overview of the specs, let's do a run through of these two machines. Now, this is only a 0.5 inch bigger screen size and actually a slightly lower resolution because this is 1200p versus 1080p. But first things first, let's have a quick look at the size of the machines against each other. So if I place the XPS on top of the ThinkPad, you can see there's a massive difference in size. So although you've only got a 0.5 inch difference in screen size, you've got a massive difference in chassis size because of the XPS's absolutely tiny bezels. This makes the laptop feel incredibly small. It makes it feel like an 11-inch versus a 14-inch, and it really does make a difference. So, this is £500 extra Ultrabook, and part of that has gone into shrinking down this laptop. So, let's have a look at the height against each other. You can also see it's incredibly thin compared to this ThinkPad T14. Weight-wise, they feel very similar because although this is a lot smaller, it's a much denser feeling package than this. This is pretty much solid aluminium, whereas this I believe is sort of carbon fibre and magnesium. So it's still strong premium materials, but there is some plastics in here. But it feels rigid and strong, but much lighter. So this is obviously going to be an awful lot easier to carry around than the T14. Now let's quickly take a look at ports. If you've watched the reviews, you'll probably be totally aware of this, but with the T14 there isn't many ports. We have a Thunderbolt 4 port, a micro SD card slot, another Thunderbolt 4 port, and a headset jack. That's it. Now when we compare to the ThinkPad, we've got a USB-C and a dedicated charging port in one, a further USB-C which is encompassed in a docking port if you're using a Lenovo dock. We've got a USB 3, an HDMI 2, a headset jack, a micro SD card slot, RJ45, Kensington lock, another USB 3 port, and this is a PC card slot. If you're working in a business that requires that, I didn't incorporate that in mine. This also has the option of a WAN slot for cellular data. So you can see in the back we have the SIM card slot. Again, I didn't choose to have that, but you could add that at a later date if you so wished. So although this is bigger, it has an awful lot more ports that are going to be useful in a business environment. Whereas this, it has more futuristic ports with Thunderbolt 4, but there's only 2 of them, and a micro SD card slot. So there's a lot less ports on here, although they are more powerful ports. This doesn't have Thunderbolt at all, being a Ryzen CPU on board. They don't have Thunderbolt 3 or Thunderbolt 4. So if you want to use an eGPU in the future, this is definitely your option, because the Thunderbolt 4 obviously will future-proof you in that regard. But as most people probably won't, and if you want something that's more versatile, then this is probably going to be a better option for you, especially if you are in a business environment and using this every day. This is going to be more helpful, I think. Certainly for me personally, I much prefer having a few more ports. So let's open them up and look at the insides of the laptop. Now, opening them up, the XPS is easier to open. You can open it with one finger, but it's not so easy to get your finger in there because they haven't got a cutout, so you're sort of fumbling around looking for the base of the lid because you don't have that inset like you do with a MacBook Pro. But once you've got your fingers and you've started lifting it, it will lift up with one hand. The T14, it won't. You've got to sort of grab it and lift it. Again, it's a sort of more of a budget orientated or a business class notebook, so they don't have that feature. Now looking at the decks, as discussed in our review, which I'm going to link down in the comments below, both of these have been previously reviewed, so if you want more detailed information, please see their individual reviews. But let me just say that the XPS has a great keyboard, it's a good layout, it works well, it's responsive with a reasonable amount of travel. In comparison, the Thinkpad has what I consider probably the best laptop keyboard on the market, and obviously that is what ThinkPads are known for. They've got just an amazing feel to them. The travel's amazing, the concave keys are amazing, the layout is brilliant. So keyboard wise, the Thinkpad will win out every day of the week. Absolutely love this keyboard. It's in my opinion, one of the biggest selling points for this laptop. The trackpads, they're both good. The XPS does have a more premium feeling trackpad. It feels a little bit more responsive, it's a good size, it glides well, whereas I find with the Thinkpad, it's not quite as accurate when you're moving it around. I can get by with it, I can happily use it, and it doesn't frustrate me, but it doesn't feel as nice as the XPS trackpad. You also have the nub as well, for the Thinkpad, die-hard Thinkpad users that require that. I've never been a big nub user. It's quite handy to have it there sometimes, and you've got the dedicated buttons for it here, left mouse, right mouse and middle mouse button, which is quite handy. With both of these laptops being sort of, premium end laptops, they both have Windows Hello. Both of them will log you in with facial recognition. The Thinkpad also has an option for a fingerprint reader as well, so if you do prefer a fingerprint to facial recognition, you have that option. The XPS also has a fingerprint reader built into the power button. Because it's built into the power button, I actually even forget it's there. Another nice feature with the Thinkpad, again because this is more of a business class notebook, is the Think Shutter. The fact that you can just flick this little switch over here and lock off the webcam. It's a hardware shutter that locks over the webcam, and you can see by the little dot there that it's enabled. If you're a business class user, that's quite a nice little feature. They both have backlit keyboards. Both of them have reasonable speakers. The XPS speakers are better than the Thinkpad T14 speakers. The Thinkpad T14 speakers are upward firing, so they sound okay, but there's very little bass. The XPS speakers are downward firing, but they've done a really good job tuning these, and for downward firing speakers, they are really good. Neither of these are as good as a MacBook Pro, but for Windows notebooks, they're both pretty good, but this would have to go for a win with the actual speakers. Now, when we're looking at the screen, This is an easy win for the XPS, and you can see here where the extra, well, part of the extra money is going for this laptop. The 1200p screen in this laptop is absolutely beautiful. It's 500 nits, the T14 is 400 nits, and even though it's 400 nits, it doesn't feel like a 400 nit screen to me. It definitely feels dimmer, maybe 350 in actuality. This does feel like a 500 nit screen. They're both matte in this option. With the XPS you can also have the 4K touch gloss screen. This is the best screen you can have on the T14. I still recommend the 1200p for most people because obviously it's anti-glare, which is good, the matte screen. It's particularly bright and it gives you that extra battery life being only 1200p. The colours are vibrant and it's a beautiful screen. This one, the colours are accurate, but they're nowhere near as vibrant as this one. It's obviously got a 16:10 aspect ratio as well, so you fit more vertical space on the screen with the XPS than you do with the T14. So though it's a 14-inch screen, it's a 16:9 screen, so obviously better for watching movies potentially, but not so good for work. So this one definitely gets a win on the speakers and the screen. Testing battery life between the two, they've both been very similar. Streaming Wi-Fi, watching YouTube at 50% brightness, both of them are getting me nigh on sort of 9 to 10 hours, as long as I'm not doing anything particularly heavy. Obviously as you're doing heavier work, the battery life will drain faster. So we've looked at the size and the weights and everything of the laptops. Something else that's quite important to take into consideration with an Ultrabook is the power pack that you'll be carrying around with it. Because although these do have great battery life, you'll still probably be carrying the power pack with you. Now the Lenovo T14, that comes with a 65 watt quite large USB-C power brick. Also a note from this power brick, it only plugs in, there's two USB-C ports but they're both on the left hand side. So you have to charge on the left with this quite large power brick. With the XPS 9310 you've got a tiny 45 watt power brick. I mean this is absolutely minuscule, you hardly even notice that in your bag. Nice and light as well. Again USB-C. And obviously with this one having thunderbolts on both sides, you can plug in the power adapter from either side. So from a travel perspective, this is certainly a nice advantage of this XPS 9310. Tiny light adapter that can also charge from both sides. So thumbs up to Dell with regards to the way they manage the charging. Now we're going to look at the performance of both of these laptops. The Tiger Lake versus the Ryzen. We all know that the Ryzen CPU is going to destroy the Tiger Lake CPU, but what we are interested in is the new Intel Xe graphics. But what I'm going to focus on is more actual games than pure benchmarks, because from my previous review of this laptop, it does feel like Intel has tuned this Xe graphics to do well in benchmarks, but it didn't seem to translate in gaming performance. So we're going to look at both of those and see how well they compare. Now the first test we're going to be running on both of these laptops is Cinebench R20. Both laptops are set to the high performance mode in their respective softwares, so they're both running the best that they can. Both are on mains with batteries pretty much charged. So these are also fresh runs, so they're both in optimal conditions, so there's going to be no thermal throttling on either. So here we go. Now as you can see on the CPU, AMD Ryzen 5 Pro with 4650U, that is 6 cores and 12 threads, against 11th gen i7 Tiger Lake, which is 4 cores and 8 threads. So this has the core advantage, but obviously this is the latest Tiger Lake, which Intel have been promising much greater performance. Let's see how they fare. Both of these laptops are very quiet. The fans hasn't started spinning up on either yet. But one thing you will notice if you have these side by side is the keyboard is warm and it gets hot, whereas this one, the keyboard is still absolutely cool to the touch. Now from what I've heard other people talking, the Ryzen 7, which is the 8 core and 16 thread version of these laptops, they do run hotter, but this Ryzen 5 for me has been an amazing performer. So clock speeds, we're getting 3 GHz at the moment on the Tiger Lake on the 4 core 8 threads, and we're also getting 3 GHz on the 6 core 12 thread Ryzen 5 Pro. Fans running faster on the Tiger Lake as well, but this is a more compact, smaller machine than the T14. So there we go, the T14 is already finished, giving us a score of 2600, which, as I've said in the T14 review video, that is right up there with a 45 watt 9th gen Intel CPU, like the 8750H or the 9750H. Tiger Lake is still running, and this is without any throttling. If you run the subsequent times, this will eventually start throttling. And it's finished with a score of 1987. Now that is a good score for an Intel 15 watt CPU, but you can see how much it's getting destroyed by a 15 watt, and this isn't even the top end, a 15 watt Ryzen 5 Pro CPU. The Ryzen 7 4750U in the top end scores just over 3000 points on the Cinebench R20, which is an absolutely incredible score. Next we're going to run the Geekbench 5 CPU benchmark. So both these obviously machines have been running for the same amount of time, so this is still a fair comparison. I'll put the task manager back up again so you can see the sort of clock speeds. We're getting, I think, higher clock speeds slightly on the Tiger Lake at the moment. This is obviously less demanding on some of these tests for all the cores. So now that we've finished the Geekbench CPU scores, what does this tell us? Obviously in the Cinebench, this was absolutely destroying the Tiger Lake with the Ryzen 5. In this test, where we're doing single core and the multi-core score, you can see that the single core absolutely destroys the Ryzen 5. We get much higher single core or low thread count core speeds. So we're getting 1500 on the single core as opposed to only 1000 on the single core on the Ryzen 5. What that'll basically mean is if you're doing less multi-core applications, this will be a lot snappier and a lot quicker to finish, those sort of applications. Whereas if you're doing a lot of rendering or applications that use all of your cores, this is going to be pretty much a better option. The multi-core score on both of these, you're getting 5485 here, whereas 5524 on the Ryzen 5. This isn't indicative because it's not a very long test. That's why the Cinebench score, this comes out much further ahead because obviously it's running longer in the multi-core score section. Now let's move over on to the GPU side. First we're going to run the Geekbench 5 OpenCL GPU benchmark. So here we can see we're getting 18,599 on the Intel Xe graphics, an incredible score. And on the Vega 6 graphics on the 4650U, we're getting 11,014, which is still a respectable score, but that is an amazing performance. And hopefully then that will translate into gaming performance difference of, 70% better than the Vega 6. So then the first GPU benchmark we're going to quickly run is going to be Unigine Valley. This is the Extreme HD preset, so 1080p Extreme full screen. So although this has a slightly different screen resolution, it'll still be running at the 1080p. I'm using MSI Afterburner to give us the overlay so that we can see the results of both of these side by side. So looking at these two side by side, you can see a massive difference in performance on the Xe graphics over the Vega 6 graphics. Quite surprised, I didn't realise it'd be this large. Easily the 70% we were sort of seeing in the Geekbench benchmark. I definitely think Intel have got a way to go with their driver optimization, and I'm certainly hoping I'm going to do some follow-up tests in future, but so far this is quite impressive. And there we go. So you can see there's quite a big difference between these two systems. The Intel Xe graphics on the 9310, we're getting a score of 761 on this Extreme preset and a frame per second average of 18.2, whereas the Vega 6 graphics is 473 with the score and a frames per second of 11.3. So there's actually quite an incredible difference between the two. Certainly much more than I was actually expecting. I thought the Vega, being AMD with Vega graphics, would actually have performed slightly better than it has done in this test. Okay, for the next benchmark we're going to be running Total War Warhammer on both of these laptops at the same resolution. So let's just quickly go into the options, graphics, and we're going to try it. We'll do it at 1280 by 720 on both, and medium graphics. Let's just give that a try. Then we're going to go to advanced, and we're going to do benchmark. Yep, let's try that. So here we can see in real games that this lead that this had in the benchmarks is completely diminished, and actually this is actually performing better on this Ryzen Vega 6 card than it is on this allegedly better Intel Xe card. And this is what I found when I did the review on this laptop in the actual gaming benchmark review I did, which I can post in the comments below. The actual gameplay footage of all the games all seemed under par. Now comparing it to this Ryzen 5, which again is only the mid-range graphics card, there's even a Vega 8 which is above this, this is actually outperforming. So let's have a quick look. Frames per second average 76.3, and the Intel Xe 72.5. So this Vega 6 card, which should be the lesser card, is actually performing better than the Intel Xe. Next gaming benchmark we're going to do is we're going to look at Dota 2. We're running this on both machines at 1080p, basic settings, but with 100% game screen render quality and 240 frames per second max frames per second. I'm just going to apply that, both on DirectX 11. Just apply that, and what I've basically tried to do is I'm going to try and control both on the one screen, so that we can see. So straight away again you can see that the Vega machine is scoring a hell of a lot more frames per second. 106 versus 78. So again, these Intel Xe graphics that are supposed to be a massive increase from previous generations really aren't living up to the hype that they've been given. Obviously it's a much nicer experience on the T14. Now we have done a gaming video for both of these laptops, which are going to be linked in the description down below. So if you want to see any further gaming videos, because we did quite a few games on both of these machines, then please click on those links to get the relevant information. I don't want to waste too much time now with everybody, but you can clearly see from the actual proper gaming benchmarks we've done so far, the Vega 6 in the Ryzen 5 Pro is outperforming the new Intel Xe graphics, which Intel has been hyping up as being so much faster than previous gen and better than anything else in the integrated market. Clearly, in actual games that are optimized, the Vega 6 is outperforming it. So to summarize on the comparison of these two machines, having spent quite a while with both these machines, using them solidly now, I love both of these machines, and I think if you were to buy either of them, you're going to be very happy. Put them together, I mean, I can't pick a winner of the two because they are two different types of devices. What I would say, if you're looking for the laptop with the most premium feel, the best screen, the best speakers, and the smallest, lightest package that packs good performance and future-proof ports, the XPS 9310 is a fantastic choice. The Thunderbolt 4 ports allow you to have an eGPU, faster drives, docks, which is a great feature for future-proofing the laptop. It's also very tiny, that you can pick it up and chuck it in a bag, much smaller than the Thinkpad T14. And even if you go for the 13-inch version of the Thinkpad, it's still got large bezels, so this is still an awful lot smaller. This is like a 13-inch screen in an 11-inch laptop with this package. If we're talking about best value for money and best performance per pound or dollar, then you've got to go with the Ryzen. This T14 is a solid workhorse of a machine with great port selection. It has the legacy ports that a business user or a lot of people they're going to really enjoy. It doesn't have Thunderbolt. You know, the AMD in the Ryzen platform, there's no such thing as Thunderbolt with these laptops, and that's a shame. But to be honest, most people, myself included, I would never use Thunderbolt on a laptop device like this. This is for taking with me and working on the go. So I would probably never ever plug a Thunderbolt into a laptop like this. It's £500 cheaper in the UK than this XPS 9310. And for that £500 less, it is a bulkier machine, but you're getting more CPU performance. And you can see from the gaming test that we've done, the GPU in the Vega 6 actually outperforms the Intel Xe graphics. Now that may change in future if Intel actually do something and improve their drivers, because in benchmarks it was really quick, but it doesn't seem to be tuned for games yet. So for £500 less, you're getting a bulkier, heavier machine, but it's got an amazing keyboard. It's got a very serviceable screen, a serviceable trackpad, and brilliant, absolutely brilliant CPU performance, and it runs cool and quiet. The keyboard never even gets warm on this machine in comparison to this XPS, where the keyboard does get quite warm. So if value for money is important to you, and you want those legacy ports, then this ThinkPad T14 is an absolute winner. And me personally, if I'm making a choice, I would vote with my wallet, and I would personally pick the T14 because I absolutely love the CPU performance and the GPU performance in this Ryzen 5 Pro CPU. And also, I like saving a bit of money. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Now obviously these are two very popular different machines for very different reasons. This is a premium lightweight package. This has got an amazing CPU and it has a good rugged package. Please pop your comments down below as to which you prefer and what you think is the best reason to buy each of these laptops. I will try and answer all those comments and questions down below. Please like and subscribe so that we can keep bringing you more content like this video today. And thank you very much for watching.